After my husband's funeral, a shocking photo of my sons at his grave revealed an incredible truth. The autumn sun hung low, casting a golden hue as I stood at the fresh mound of dirt, my heart heavy with despair. Jack, my eldest, fidgeted with the hem of his jacket while Ethan clutched the edge of his mother's dress, both boys wearing faces that could barely conceal the confusion swirling inside them. Leaves danced around us, mocking the stillness of my shattered world. The moment felt surreal, as if time had slowed just to let me drown in my sorrow. Professor Thompson, with his fading memory and kind eyes, approached the boys, offering them words I couldn't hear. His warm smile cut through the chill of despair. I struggled to maintain my composure, unsure if I should be grateful for his comforting presence, or enraged at how easily he embraced my sons while I felt so lost. My husband's life, wrapped in the threads of academia, echoed through the professor's voice. Did they understand the weight that his legacy carried? That grief was compounded by the fear of this sudden responsibility. Days morphed into an indistinct blur as I sifted through artifacts of our life together, desperately searching for clues to refashion a semblance of normalcy. One afternoon, amidst dusty boxes in the attic, I stumbled upon a faded photograph of the boys, smiles beaming as they stood at the professor's doorstep, an image of pure innocence. But what struck me was the date written on the back, just months before my husband's untimely passing. Why had I never seen this? How much did they truly know? I discovered that their father had gifted them more than just fond memories. He had left them an inclination for brilliance that our community would dismiss. My chest constricted with dread as I recalled the school's indifferent glances and muttered judgments during parent-teacher conferences. The bitter truth hung heavily in the air. Our financial struggles marked us as lesser in the eyes of those who prided themselves on hard work and traditional values. My heart clenched for Jack and Ethan, for their potential that now seemed tied to the weight of our poverty. Just as I began to sense a path forward, an icy interaction with school officials shattered the fragile hope I had worked to build. The way they brushed off our concerns felt as if sharp daggers were driven into my resolve. They dismissed Jack's questions and Ethan's curiosity, their laughter echoing the very prejudices that plagued my past. Desperation gripped my insides, forcing me to confront the systemic challenges standing between my sons and their potential futures. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The weight pressing down on me became an unbearable mix of anger, doubt, and determination. For every moment of strength, there lurked a whisper of inadequacy, casting shadows over my resolve. I was cornered between standing tall for my boys and collapsing under the burdens of single motherhood. As waves of uncertainty crashed over me, I felt their small, proud figures radiating strength alongside me, igniting a flicker of hope. With every ounce of my being, I readied for the school board meeting where decisions would shape my boys' futures. But as I rehearsed the argument in my mind, the photograph of the boys at the professor's doorstep loomed large in my thoughts, a poignant reminder of resilience hidden within our family. Would I have the courage to confront the institution? To break the narrative that had shackled our hope? My breath caught in my throat. The future of the Sinclair family hung precariously in the balance, trembling between promise and despair. I stood outside the school board meeting room, the cold tile pressing against my heels, grounding me in reality. The fluorescent lights flickered, each pulse echoing my racing heartbeat. This was it, the moment I'd prepared for through sleepless nights, rehearsing my speech in front of the mirror, until my reflection felt like a stranger. Yet, I couldn't shake the doubt. What if my voice trembled? What if the sympathy I had strategically felt melted away under scrutiny? As I entered the room filled with members more interested in routine than real change, my stomach twisted. Was I an imposter demanding a voice against individuals who seemed nearly impervious to hardship? My mind flashed to Jack and Ethan, their bright eyes filled with dreams that now felt like shadows against the constraints of our reality. I had to be more than just their mother. I had to become the advocate they deserved. With each step towards the podium, I visualized the photo of my sons. Pure, untainted joy. I drew strength from their smiles, steeling my resolve. I was not only fighting for their present, I was fighting for a future even they couldn't yet comprehend. As I stood beneath the stark glare of the committee, I cleared my throat, forcing the surge of confidence up through my core. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My voice tremored, but I pressed on. I spoke about the potential I saw in Jack and Ethan, the brilliance that glimmered beneath the surface unrecognized. I recounted the dismissive remarks from teachers who chose to see only their means of support and not their remarkable capabilities. Anger fueled my words as I examined the gap between their expectations and the reality of our lives. Yet, with every passionate word, doubt nagged at the edges of my consciousness. What gave me the authority to invoke such claims? I was not just facing the board, but the voices that had belittled me throughout my life. A blend of self-doubt and shame that echoed relentlessly in my mind. The energy in the room seemed to shift, eyes narrowing in skepticism rather than empathy. Before I could falter, I pivoted my approach. I recounted memories, Jack teaching Ethan how to read, Ethan asking the endless questions about the universe. I highlighted their friendship with Professor Thompson, the way he saw potential in them that others did not. It became clear to me. My vulnerability was not a weakness, but a bridge connecting our reality to a potential future. I hadn't only been grieving. I had been discovering a fight within myself. A fierce mama bear ready to protect her cubs. As my voice steadied, I began to see the faces of those before me soften, perhaps even shifting from dismissal to curiosity. Yet with the first flickers of change igniting hope within me, I heard a voice. A condescending scoff from the back of the room. A reminder that not all were ready to change their thinking. You expect us to change our fundamental values over anecdotal stories? A new wave of challenge swept over me. My heart raced, not only from the encounter but at the possibility that the battle was far from over. I had expected this pushback, but facing it felt different. Now I wasn't just a grieving widow. I was a mother pulling the threads of her family together amidst disdain. My determination solidified, and the realization washed over me like a second breath. This was the beginning. As I left the room, my own ramifications dawning, I felt a fire igniting within, one that promised to send tremors through this institution. What would be my next move? The moment felt ripe for reckoning. The battle for Jack and Ethan's future had only just begun, and I sensed the next confrontation would shape not just my resolve, but our destiny. Would I find allies in unexpected places, or face down my opponents alone? The stakes had risen, and the path remained uncertain. The next morning the harsh light of dawn flooded my kitchen, illuminating a battleground of half-eaten toast and chilled coffee. I stared blankly at the breakfast table, thoughts tangled in a storm of emotions. The meeting from yesterday haunted me, each gaze and smirk replaying like a broken record in my mind. They had dismissed not just my words, but the worth of my children. Anger simmered just beneath the surface, demanding to be unleashed, yet I questioned how I could leverage that energy into something substantial. I had to prepare for the next meeting, realize that this wasn't just about survival. It was about strategy. I grabbed my laptop, opened a page, and began to type furiously. I wrote about Jack and Ethan's strengths, specific examples of their abilities and intellectual curiosity. It hadn't been enough to appeal to emotions. I needed data, recommendations, possible solutions that might secure their futures in spite of the opposition I faced. Pushing aside my self-doubt, I reached out to Professor Thompson, hoping that his insights could provide the edge I needed. His response was prompt, an enthusiastic offer to help. "Let's meet later this afternoon, and we can discuss how we can advocate for Jack and Ethan together. They deserve to be seen." His encouragement wrapped around me like a warm blanket, lifting my spirits. That afternoon, the dull gray of the sky mirrored the uncertainty brewing in my heart. I met the professor at a small cafe, the scent of roasted coffee beans filling the air, a stark contrast to the tension I felt inside. As he arrived, his vibrant energy crackled in the air, infusing the space with an optimism I desperately needed. We huddled over a table and he began to dissect the realities of the education system, peeling back the layers of bureaucracy that favored conformity over individuality. His brilliance illuminated paths I hadn't considered. We brainstormed collaborative strategies to present at the next school board meeting, tactics that could challenge the status quo rather than simply confront it. Empowerment through partnership, he emphasized, tapping the table with each idea. Engage with teachers who have open minds. Rally their support. We need to show the board that Jack and Ethan are not just students. They are future innovators. Each sentence he uttered felt like a spark to my burgeoning resolve. I was not a solitary force battling faceless giants. I could rely on those skilled at maneuvering within this landscape. As our conversation unfolded, my confidence bloomed. I wasn't just their mother. I was becoming an advocate with allies. Individuals who understood the labyrinthine challenges and the fierce need for change. As the sun set behind the buildings, a flood of renewed purpose surged through me. By harnessing the influence of those willing to listen, I could create ripples of change. A movement grounded not just in anecdotes, but armed with logic and determination. When I returned home, I found Jack and Ethan sprawled on the living room floor, lost in a world of colorful construction blocks. Their laughter echoed through the silence of the house, a sound that filled me with warmth and promise. I paused, contemplating how their future could look if I succeeded in my mission. Each giggle served as a reminder of what I was fighting for, igniting a fiercer ambition within myself. Yet in the depths of my mind lay the question that wouldn't fade. What would happen when I confronted the board again? Would they try to undermine my newfound allies? Would my personal growth be met with hostility? Doubt loomed like a shadow, a constant reminder that the stakes had never been higher. As I prepared to strategize for the next confrontation, a single thought ignited my resolve. It was time to take a stand, not just for Jack and Ethan, but for every child silenced in the system. The next meeting would not only test my resolve, it might reveal the true extent of my capabilities as an advocate. The hour drew closer, and I sensed a pivotal shift on the horizon. Would I emerge victorious, or was a deeper struggle waiting to unfold? The uncertainty electrified my spirit, spurring me toward an inevitable reckoning. The days leading up to the meeting felt like a tightrope walk. Each moment I spent with Jack and Ethan became a lesson in resilience. Their innocence provided a sanctuary from the swirling doubts in my mind. I found strength there, yet a knot of anxiety twisted in my stomach. I was no longer merely a parent. I was a voice yearning for authority, ready to confront the forces threatening my children's futures. I immersed myself in preparation. During quiet evenings, I pored over articles about educational advocacy and legal rights concerning special education. I learned about individualized education plans, IEPs, and the system's various protections meant to uphold children's rights. Knowledge was power, and with every page I turned, I felt the weight of my helplessness begin to lift. Professor Thompson's words echoed in my mind. Empowerment through partnership. My focus sharpened. I reached out to a few sympathetic teachers, those who had shown signs of flexibility in teaching methods. I invited them for coffee, determined to share my vision, not just for Jack and Ethan, but for all students like them. I laid out my thoughts clearly, articulating my understanding of their potential and the love and dedication I saw in their pursuits. One by one, I secured their support. It wasn't just about Jack and Ethan anymore. It became a collective stance against complacency. As I gathered these allies, I felt a sense of camaraderie, a shared purpose solidifying into a tangible force. I was transforming from an isolated fighter into the catalyst of change. The day of the meeting arrived cloaked in palpable tension. My heart raced as I walked through the school's corridors, the familiar walls now symbolizing both the battleground and the promise of transformation. The conference room was filled with the district's board members, their faces a collection of skepticism and anticipation. I took a deep breath, willing the residual anxiety to dissipate, replacing it with the months of preparation that had culminated in this moment. I began my presentation, projecting my voice with clarity and purpose, highlighting Jack and Ethan's unique strengths. I wove their stories into the fabric of my arguments, illustrating their capacities and potential contributions to the community. But as I looked around, I noticed subtle disruptions. A dismissive nod here, a roll of the eyes there. Each small gesture was a dagger aimed at my resolve. The board members were entrenched in their biases, clinging to rigid concepts of what success meant. I felt my pulse quicken again, anger bubbling beneath the surface. Yet, I pushed through, recalling Professor Thompson's advice. I shifted my approach. Instead of merely countering their indifference, I invited them into a dialogue. What if, I posed, instead of focusing on limitations, we celebrate the strengths of students like Jack and Ethan? What innovative teaching methods could we implement to cultivate their talents? I sensed a shift begin. A couple of sympathetic expressions flickered among the board members. The conversation that ensued wasn't just defensive, it was reflective. I saw the wheels turning in some minds, a crack forming in the armor of their resistance. We began to discuss adaptations that could benefit other students, envisioning a system that embraced diversity as an asset rather than a burden. Leaving that meeting, I felt a surge of empowerment. I had faced an intimidating wall head-on and chipped away at it. But with every victory came a whisper of doubt. Would they support Jack and Ethan once I'd left the room? Would their interest last? As I drove home, exhausted yet exhilarated, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the rearview mirror. Who was I becoming? And more importantly, what would it take for me to continue this fight, regardless of the opposition? The real test lay ahead. The outcome of this meeting was just the beginning. It was time to dig deeper into my strengths and confront not only the external challenges, but my own internal barriers as well. The reckoning was not merely with the board. This battle was also for my own self-assertion as an advocate. My thoughts swirled as I turned on the radio to fill the silence. The song that played had a line that resonated deeply. Every warrior knows. I turned it up, letting the words fuel my resolve. But the nagging question wouldn't leave my mind. What if the board fought back harder than I anticipated? What would I be willing to risk next? The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting a golden hue on the aftermath of the meeting. I sat at the kitchen table, a steaming mug of coffee in front of me, the aroma mingling with the lingering tension in my mind. The exhilaration of progress was infectious, yet the ticking clock reminded me that I was racing against time and uncertainty. As I sipped the coffee, its warmth seeped into my bones, yet my thoughts resisted the comfort. I envisioned the board meeting's outcome, those fleeting moments of agreement and shared vision. But every moment of optimism was met with the sharp sting of skepticism. Would they follow through? Complexity swirled around my thoughts. I'd tasted the sweetness of support, but beneath it lay the bitterness of doubt. Motivated by necessity, I organized my notes, transforming the scattered ideas into a cohesive action plan. Fueled by ambition and a newfound sense of purpose, I mapped out the next steps. I recognized that I couldn't rely solely on the board members' goodwill. The implementation of change required vigilance and sustained effort on my part. I grabbed a pen, jotting down potential allies, strategies, ideas for workshops, and advocacy events. Anything that might leverage the initial momentum. The image of Jack and Ethan sparked within me. Their laughter and shared moments of wonder pulled me back. What was it like to discover the world with unabashed curiosity? I didn't want them to inherit a system that would stifle that spirit. A familiar anger surged within me, an urge to face not just the educational structures, but the pervasive mindset that clung to outdated notions of potential. I needed to confront their resistance with authenticity. Consulting more teachers who recognized the need for a shift became my priority. I reached out to the educators who had been my confidants. I invited them over to brainstorm, coffee cups in hand, and ideas flowing freely. This time, I came prepared to share an actionable framework, successful case studies, community programs, and adaptive practices. The very tools we could use to pioneer our own pathway to change within the school system. As each teacher arrived, I felt the energy shift. A gathering of souls united in purpose. We spent hours taking turns at the whiteboard, creativity spilling into each discussion. I felt a sense of exhilaration in others' enthusiasm. Each new idea was a brick, building a wall of awareness against the preconceived limitations. I was no longer alone, but part of something larger, something hopeful. As we wrapped up, I noticed a teacher, Ms. Latham, lingering slightly away from the group. She was in her late 50s, a veteran caring for the unheralded needs of many students. I felt drawn to her, sensing unexpressed concerns brewing beneath her calm demeanor. "Do you have any thoughts you'd want to share before we finish?" I inquired, curiosity urging me to dig deeper. With a hesitance I didn't expect, she nodded. "I admire your courage, truly. But do you think? Are you ready for the backlash? Those who oppose change often shout the loudest. They have power." Ms. Latham's words hung in the air, punctuating my resolve with doubt. Had I considered the repercussions I might face? It was one thing to lead discussions, quite another to stand tall amidst criticism. The next steps I took needed to reflect that caution. My mind swirled. It was clear. I had started a journey that would push me into the public arena. Coinciding with advocacy for Jack and Ethan, I now needed to cultivate resilience in the face of potential backlash. I could sense the gears shifting within me, the emergence of a warrior spirit ready to confront the inevitable challenges. As I lay in bed that night, my heart raced. The echo of Ms. Latham's concerns loomed, fueling my doubts and growing determination alike. I needed to prepare myself for the storm that could rise, a tempest that might challenge the very foundations of my advocacy. Yet something deeper convulsed within me, a relentless drive to foster change, regardless of the consequences. With every breath, clarity emerged. I would embrace the struggle and reclaim my voice, not just for Jack and Ethan, but for all those navigated through the system's shadows. And then, just as I was about to drift off, another thought struck me like a bolt of lightning. What if I could gather a coalition, moving from isolated cases to systemic reform? What if I could summon others to share their stories, amplifying our collective fight? It felt precarious, but exhilarating. Determined, I reached for my notepad by the nightstand, scribbling a wildly ambitious plan. But uncertainty lingered still. Would this newfound energy suffice to face a deeper conflict within the board? The real threat that awaited. The morning arrived with an intensity that matched the storm brewing inside me, Sunlight streamed through the slits of the blinds, illuminating the pages of my hastily drafted plan. My heartbeat echoed in my ears, resonating with the urgency of what lay ahead. Today I would take the first step in solidifying my vision. Not just for Jack and Ethan, but for all the children whose futures depended on a more progressive educational approach. Sitting at the table, I flipped through my notes, skimming over the suggestions crafted during our brainstorming session. Each one shimmered with promise, yet the specter of dissent loomed ominously. The voices of caution replayed in my mind. Could I withstand the riptide of opposition? I took a deep cleansing breath, resolving to transform fear into focus, a tool rather than a hindrance. My first action of the day involved a phone call to Ms. Latham. Her insight had struck a chord, igniting a flicker of camaraderie in my pursuit. As the line rang, anticipation twisted in my gut. Would she share my ambition, or further amplify my trepidation? When she answered, her voice, steady and reassuring, welcomed my ideas. "I'm glad you reached out. I've been thinking about this too," she said, a warmth spreading through me. As we spoke, brainstorming new strategies for addressing the existing pitfalls in our educational system, a realization dawned. I was not just advocating for change. I was forging alliances. This wasn't an individual crusade. It was a movement waiting to flourish. Together, our experiences could compile into a powerful testimony against resistance. After our conversation, I sat back in my chair, envisioning what it would look like to hone these newfound partnerships. My perspective shifted as I wondered what it might take to organize these collective voices, to encapsulate our shared experiences into coherent arguments that demanded attention. I would craft a presentation not only showcasing our grievances, but also detailing tangible solutions. A proposal that could challenge the archaic educational framework. The clock on the wall became a relentless reminder of the time limitation. Minutes felt like seconds as I pressed through revisions, fine-tuning every detail as though the fate of our cause hinged upon my articulation. Each slide I created began to feel like a narrative, a story augmented with data, emotions, and urgencies. When I arrived at school a few hours later, the energy felt different. Teachers exchanged glances filled with anticipation and apprehension. I had enlisted a handful to join a discussion about the presentation, hoping to initiate an internal rallying point. As they trickled in, excitement washed over the room, a palpable tension ignited by the urgent ambition that hung in the air. Every gesture conveyed vulnerability and resolve, a collective hope for what could arise from our assembled voices. As I prepared to deliver my proposal, I caught a glimpse of Miss Latham nodding encouragingly. Yet, just when I felt momentum surge within me, a rush of cold doubt invaded my thoughts. What if the board received our efforts with defiance? I steeled my mind. They could attempt to silence us or dismiss our concerns as mere noise. Nevertheless, the risk was one I was ready to take. With renewed conviction, I began my presentation, channeling all the apprehension into clear, cogent arguments. Each statistic met with silence before bursting into applause from my colleagues. A spark ignited, illuminating our vision and plastering determined expressions across faces that had previously worn uncertainty. Articulating our shared narrative allowed me to embrace their vulnerabilities, transforming them into collective strengths. In the midst of the animated discourse, my phone buzzed discreetly in my pocket. Glancing down, my heart sank, not because of the message itself, but the name attached. The very figure I dreaded, the antagonist whose power promised to silence us, was calling. The moment felt pivotal, a twist in the narrative I hadn't anticipated. I weighed the implications, realizing that while I was confronting the system, I was also walking toward what could either be a turning point or a precipice. Would I answer and confront the looming threat head-on? Or would I allow this momentary shock to dictate my trajectory? Time slowed as I hovered over the screen, uncertainty coiling around me like a serpent. The next choice would determine if I was merely a player in the game or the one reshaping the rules. Would this be my moment of truth? Fingers trembling, I hovered over the green call button, my instincts pulling me in two directions. Ignoring the call felt like bidding farewell to my resolve, an admission that fear could conquer my aspirations. I steadied myself, feeling the weight of anticipation anchor my heart to the floor. One deep breath, then another. I pressed it. Hello? I steadied my voice, masking the chaos beneath. Is this the voice of resistance I hear? The tone was smooth, almost mocking. Mr. Anderson. The very embodiment of the bureaucratic wall I had committed to dismantling. I hope you've enjoyed your little presentation today. I must say, it was quite the show. I straightened my back, a gesture that resonated with defiance. It wasn't a show, Mr. Anderson. It was the beginning of a much-needed dialogue. He chuckled, insufferably confident. A dialogue? A noble endeavor, but naive. You believe you can change the course of this institution? You know how many battles we've faced just to keep the status quo? Those words lodged themselves like splinters in my mind. Each syllable carried the weight of decades of complacency. It's not just about changing courses. It's about ensuring that every child gets a fair chance. Something you've overlooked, I replied, my own determination taking shape. We both know how the board operates. I hope you're prepared for the consequences of your actions. His words were cold, infused with an unmistakable veiled threat. As I hung up, the nervous energy that had coiled in my stomach transformed into a fierce fire. This wasn't merely a challenge. It was a call to arms, an emerging battle line against a deeply ingrained system of fear and stagnation. I had no choice but to lean into this moment of confrontation. But how? Retracing the conversation on paper, I noted his words, parsing each remark through a lens of strategy. Mr. Anderson's dismissal revealed his own insecurity, a desperate attempt to maintain control. If I could frame my campaign intelligently, highlighting not just the issues, but also the potential victories waiting to be claimed, I could turn this into a weapon, drafting my own battle plan. Suddenly I saw the truth in my reluctance to answer his call. What coursed through me was not just fear. It was an unsettling realization of my own potential for power. I visualized the boardroom, the starkness of their polished table, each member an obstacle but also a momentum shaper. I could use Mr. Anderson's arrogance to my advantage. I needed to outsmart him. That night I plowed through research, diving deep into statistics and poignant case studies that highlighted transformative educational practices. New strategies flickered in my mind like fireflies, illuminating uncharted territories for my proposal. Ideas flowed fiercely as I annotated notes, each stroke laying the groundwork for my strategies. Turning my vulnerabilities into golden opportunities. The dawn crept up quietly, the daylight shifting the atmosphere of my dimly lit study. My heart quickened as resolve coalesced into clarity. I was no longer merely an educator. I was a challenger positioned at the helm of potential change. Just as I finalized my notes, the gravity of our collective situation struck home. A reminder of why I was doing this surged through me, fueling my fire further. I had already built an alliance, but a formidable strategy was now required to fortify that foundation. Then it hit me. I needed a way to confront Mr. Anderson directly, to unveil our voices before those who might dismiss our fight. This would be my stand. A moment where I wouldn't just present facts, but galvanize my colleagues into sustained action. As I collected my notes for the day ahead, a single thought resonated like a drum. The time had come to face the antagonism directly, to turn the tides and force a reckoning. Would I summon the strength to rally against the very entity that sought to suppress us? Or would I falter in the face of entrenched power? The morning sun filtered through the office blinds, casting sharp lines across the table littered with statistics and articles. Each piece of research I'd painstakingly gathered now felt like a lifeline, a tangible representation of my vision. But as I visually mapped out my strategy, a seed of doubt took root. Was I truly equipped to challenge someone like Mr. Anderson? My experience, though rich in classroom wins, now seemed fragile against the backdrop of institutional resistance. I took a moment to breathe deeply, focusing on the quiet thrum of my heartbeat. Doubt was a familiar shadow, always lurking when I stepped into unfamiliar territories. But this wasn't about me. This was about the children, those whose futures were molded by the very policies I coveted to change. Determination ignited in me again. I recalled their bright faces, the potential each child held. What I lacked in political maneuvering, I had in passion. I began sketching a draft of my proposal, formatting it not just as a mere suggestion, but as a manifesto of sorts, a declaration that would voice what so many felt, but couldn't articulate. As I typed, the channel of my thoughts began to clear. I envisioned a presentation infused with personal stories and statistical analysis, an emotional thread intertwined with powerful facts, highlighting curriculum failures alongside success stories from schools that had embraced change, could demonstrate a vision for what was possible. With each keystroke, I imagined standing before the board, each member poised, ready to react. With clarity came the acknowledgement that their decision-making was often driven by fear of losing influence. What if I could craft my story in a way that surpassed their defenses? Then the thought solidified. Rather than merely inviting them to accept change, I would summon them to envision a future that made their own positions relevant. I would make it about their legacy, appealing to their desire to be remembered as reformers, rather than facilitators of stagnation. The phone buzzed incessantly, but I ignored it, all my focus directed toward my outline. Around mid-morning, a sudden idea struck, one that sent a surge of urgency through me. It was crucial to bring my colleagues into this dialogue, to prepare them for the confrontation. They needed to feel the same fire I had discovered in myself. Together, we could create a force strong enough to challenge the board's status quo. I grabbed my phone and texted a few trusted allies, inviting them to an impromptu brainstorming session that afternoon. My stomach turned with anxiety at the thought of speaking without the polished veneer of a presentation, but pushed it aside. Authenticity was my ally here. I needed them to understand the depth of my conviction, to see how this fight wasn't just mine. It belonged to all of us. As the sun inched higher, shadows gradually receding, the energy in the room shifted to one of empowerment. This was no longer just research. It was a plan, taking shape, a burgeoning movement. We were the voices that could no longer be silenced, and I felt the intoxicating thrill of possibility dancing on the edge of my thoughts. But just as excitement surged, a claustrophobic tension gripped me. What if the meeting turned out to be disastrous? What if my colleagues didn't share my fervor? What if they were too entrenched in the fear Mr. Anderson wielded? I pushed the doubts aside, countering them with visualizations of success, impactful dialogues, inspired allies, and the swelling movement that could emerge from our shared purpose. And then a chilling thought danced across my mind. If we failed, we would have to live with Mr. Anderson's grip tightening around our dreams. I had to dig deep, summon every principle I believed in, and ensure that we would not falter in the face of doubt. This meeting would be everything, and I could feel it. The pivotal moment looming ahead. The stakes had never been higher. Would my colleagues join me in this fight? Or would I find myself standing alone against a bureaucracy built on fear and resistance? The unresolved tension coiled in my gut, anticipation etching itself into my heart. I drew in a steadying breath, mentally preparing for what lay ahead. If action was to be taken, Now was the time to galvanize every ounce of courage I could muster. The moment of reckoning was upon me. Would the voices meander into the conversation, or would they rise in a united front? Only time would tell. The clock on the wall ticked, its sound echoing my racing heart as I stood in front of the conference room door. My colleagues would arrive any moment, a mix of excitement and dread flooding my senses. I gripped my notes tightly, hands clammy, preparing not just to present a proposal, but to ignite a collective spirit within the room. As the door swung open, familiar faces entered, each one bearing the marks of their own silent struggles. I gauged their expressions. None showed the fervor I'd hoped for, but there was curiosity at least. I offered a tentative smile, the weight of expectation heavy on my shoulders. "Thanks for coming, everyone," I began, my voice steady despite the tremor in my nerves. "Today I want to talk about the changes we can bring to our curriculum. Changes that not only enhance our teaching, but also transform our students' futures." I paused, scanning their faces, searching for signs of agreement, encouragement. Instead, I met Evan's skeptical glance, his arms crossed tightly over his chest. I felt that familiar knot of doubt tighten. Was I just a dreamer in a room full of pragmatists? That lingering uncertainty sent another tremor through me, but I pressed on. "I've compiled research, anecdotes from other schools, and I really believe we can craft a strong case that resonates with the board." As I showcased my slides, I instinctively reached for the emotional thread, recounting the stories of students struggling under outdated standards. I shared a student's journey through adversity, carefully detailing how innovative methods had changed her trajectory. The room slowly warmed, a few nodding along as the stories unfolded, a sign of potential agreement. But Evan cleared his throat, interjecting, "That's all great, but what do we do about Mr. Anderson? He holds power over this entire process. You can't seriously think we'll change the board's mind." His words landed like a heavy stone, crushing the momentum I'd gained. Leaders like him often embraced caution and preservation over risk, no matter how passionately I argued. Could I truly sway those too entrenched in their roles to consider risk, even if it meant jeopardizing the future of the children we served? Taking a deep breath, I launched into the heart of my proposal, a call to action framed as an urgent plea for the children. But what if we framed it differently? What if we presented our initiative not as a threat to the administration, but as an opportunity for the board to be legitimate reformers? A chance to leave a lasting legacy beyond just maintaining the status quo? I emphasized their legacy, the possibility of being remembered as innovators, rather than mere enforcers of bureaucracy. The air shifted slightly, as if my words were planting seeds. The conversation ignited, an unexpected fire appearing in the eyes of my colleagues when Mary, ever the silent observer, spoke up. "I've been researching similar methods, and I think we could integrate them without stepping on Anderson's toes. If we keep the language focused on accountability, rather than change." Hope blossomed. As ideas flew around the room, the energy surged and I began to see a flicker of unity, a realization that we were fighting for the same cause. It felt good. This was what I needed, but with it came a sharp realization. Inspiring teamwork was my newfound responsibility. As we navigated through strategies, the afternoon faded into a flurry of thoughts and plans. Each voice mattered, and with every contribution, I felt less like a solitary actor in a one-woman show, and more like a conductor leading an orchestra. Then, as the momentum peaked with the excitement blossoming, my phone buzzed relentlessly in my pocket, pulling my focus back and threading uncertainty through the room's synergy. Everyone paused as I fished it out, my heart plummeting. An email from the board flashed across the screen, a reminder of the imminent meeting where I would have to stand my ground against Mr. Anderson. The countdown to confrontation was speeding up. "Let's note this," I said, gathering the scattered paper. Our proposal isn't finished, but we're building something important. We have to be ready for feedback, good or bad. As the meeting drew to a close, I felt fortified, yet an undercurrent of tension twisted in my stomach. I had harnessed energy and creativity, yet the looming specter of Mr. Anderson's rejection was still very much alive. As I returned to my desk, anxiety pressed down like a weight, mingling with a newfound sense of agency. The depth of my emotions reflected my commitment. But I could sense the ticking clock. The deadline to present was closing fast, and I still had to solidify their support before facing him. The moment was closing in, and I felt the urgent need to prepare for each potential obstacle he might throw my way. What would it take to rally not just my colleagues but myself when the time to confront him arrived? The time had come to face my greatest challenge yet. Would my newfound confidence hold? Would our collaborative strategy survive the scrutiny of a man adept at extinguishing even the strongest flames of passion? Days passed like the quickening rhythm of my heart. The impending board meeting drew closer, each hour a subtle reminder of the storm that loomed ahead. I gathered every ounce of courage, my focus sharpened by the poignant reminder of why I was fighting. Jack and Ethan's joy-filled faces anchored me. Their laughter remained etched in my memory. But deep within, anxiety flickered like the waning light of a candle, threatening to extinguish at any moment. It was in a quiet moment, sipping lukewarm coffee at the kitchen table, that I surmised the undeniable truth. This wasn't merely a battle for Jack and Ethan's academic future. It was a transformation of my identity. This fight had ignited a dormant strength within me, a realization that I wasn't just a grieving widow defending her children's interests, but an advocate willing to confront systemic inequalities. I had already demonstrated tenacity against the tide of complacency. Now I needed to prove it in the cold, sterile meeting room. On the morning of the meeting, nerves thrummed through my veins, urgency driving my actions. I grabbed my carefully organized notes, ensuring my research was robust and infused with passion. The classroom scenes I'd witnessed, the potential wasted. This wasn't just about numbers. It was about lives. I envisioned standing in front of the board members, reciting the statistics, stories, and, in a pivotal moment, tethering it all back to the children we were meant to serve. As I approached the conference room, the air thickened with tension. Board members drifted in, their expressions a mix of disinterest and skepticism. In that moment, the stakes crystallized in my mind. I regained composure, anchored by conviction. I stepped to the front, silencing the murmurs with a steady voice. Thank you for this opportunity to address you once again. Today isn't merely about policy adjustments. It's about recognizing the strengths within our student body that you may not yet see, particularly in Jack and Ethan. Eyes flickered, some intrigued, others dismissively skeptical. I pressed on, feeling adrenaline surge. I highlighted specific examples that showcased Jack's curiosity and Ethan's creativity. With each word, doubt slipped further away, replaced by a solid confidence rooted deep in my newfound advocacy. Yet as I delivered my presentation, I anticipated Mr. Anderson's inevitable pushback. When it came, his condescending tone rippled through the room. These anecdotes are touching, but we need tangible metrics. You can't expect the board to make drastic changes based on a wish list of hopes. I sensed the skepticism echoing in my mind, the doubts long buried bubbling to the surface. But then I remembered my allies, my supportive colleagues who had rallied to my side. I gestured to the collaborative research we'd gathered, presenting a data-backed framework that compared our educational outcomes with schools that had embraced innovative, inclusive practices. The air shifted again. I could see the slight softening of the room, eyes narrowing in contemplative thought. This wasn't simply an emotional plea. It was factual. It was necessary. And, crucially, it was about them securing a legacy of change, not just continuity. One board member, Mrs. Jenkins, leaned forward. You mean to say that integrating diverse teaching strategies can lead to higher engagement levels? Yes. I responded unwavering. Research proves it. And I believe with each child's unique narrative in the right environment, we can not only elevate our standards but redefine what success looks like. For the first time, a thread of an opening appeared. A whisper of curiosity that burgeoned into shared acknowledgement. The room began to hum with a new energy. My colleagues stepping up, contributing shared experiences, reinforcing the possibility of what we could achieve together. It turned into a dialogue, a space where ideas flourished rather than suffocated. After what felt like an eternity, we reached the conclusion of the meeting. I felt depleted, yet exhilarated. There was recognition, a spark of admiration in the faces before me. I had not only fought for Jack and Ethan, but had transformed our collective grief into a narrative of hope. We weren't just advocating for change. We were crafting it, rekindling purpose within a resilient community. Leaving that boardroom, a surge of triumph coursed through me. The voice of self-doubt had been drowned by the roar of collaboration. Jack and Ethan deserved a brighter future, and I was now an active architect of that promise. As I exited through the halls illuminated by residual optimism, I reveled in my transformation. I had achieved what once felt impossible, articulating my conviction within a system that had seemed impenetrable. I recognized that I was more than just their mother. I had matured into their advocate, a steadfast champion entrenched in the fight for their futures and every child's right to education. With gratitude and solid confidence, I reflected on how far I had come. It was a journey marked by resilience, vulnerability, and unfaltering love. One fight had merely culminated in this victory. The true challenge, and the true achievement, lay ahead. Embarking on this journey had been daunting, but now it felt destined. This was not just a moment of triumph. It was a lifetime's endeavor, a commitment to persistence that would not be stifled by resistance. As we stand together, we demand the same respect and acknowledgement our children deserve. The freedom to learn and thrive. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support for emotional stories like these. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, making a difference that echoes through the community. Comment your reactions and theories about this transformative conclusion. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.